Hello everyone and welcome back to a brand new video of Fox Flicks on SCP Explained. Today we're going to see the sad origin story of SCP-096, the Shy Guy.
The SCP Foundation specializes in tracking down and containing anomalies that are difficult to find, and that often will do anything they can to avoid being found. One anomaly in particular hates being seen more than anything, and will punish anyone who looks at its face with a horrific fate. SCP-096 is a mysterious creature, not only because it destroys anyone who sees what it truly looks like. No one is entirely certain where it came from, what exactly it is, or why it reacts so violently to being perceived. There are, however, several theories as to the Shy Guy's origin, and none of them are particularly cheerful. Some suggest an experiment gone wrong. Others believe it to be the last remaining member of an unknown species of mountain-dwelling humanoids. But one theory about SCP-096's origin stands out as particularly tragic in nature. In this story,
when your task takes... We're back.
SCP-096 was not always a long-limbed, pale beast cowering in the corner and hiding its face from the world. It was once an ordinary man, like anyone you might pass on the street. He was someone's son, someone's friend, a person with hopes, dreams, and passions. A human being who, through anomalous circumstances beyond his control, was made into a monster. Many years ago, there was a mountaineer named Jack. All his adult life, he had been obsessed with reaching higher and higher peaks, climbing every mountain he could in order to test his limits, pit himself against the power of nature, and bask in the sweet reward that was the view from the top. It began as a sport, a way to build up strength while taking in incredible natural beauty, but over time, as he conquered increasingly difficult challenges, it became an obsession. Like every obsession eventually does, climbing mountains began to take over his life, driving everything else away. He struggled to hold down a job, his marriage fell apart, and his relationships to his friends and family became increasingly distant and strained. Still, he couldn't bring himself to care much. He spent his alone time in the wilderness, or every so often embarking on trips with other mountaineers. Whether he was going at it solo or working with others, he was living for the climb. Over the years, he took on Cerro Torre in Argentina, the Aiguille in Switzerland, and Denali in Alaska. He especially enjoyed climbing in extreme cold, braving the ice and snow as he embarked on his climbs. The few fellow mountaineers he kept up with gave him the nickname Jack Frost. After years of refining his craft, building his strength, he set his sights on the highest mountain in the world, his personal white whale, Mount Everest itself. It was one of the deadliest climbs in the world, with its staggering height, storms, and frozen graveyard of fallen climbers dotting the snowy surface. But he was determined. He would not join the ranks of the fallen, but instead be one of the victorious that reached the top of Everest and came back down in one piece. He could feel it in his bones. Jack arrived in Nepal with a pack full of climbing equipment, the best boots money could buy, and layers upon layers of clothing to keep himself warm on the journey to the summit. He lowered his goggles over his eyes, summoned his courage, and prepared for the incredibly difficult climb. The cold seeped into his core. The winds nipped at his face, numbing his nose and leaching through his gloves and boots as he went. But Jack pressed on. He welcomed the sensation, the bite of it. It was a reminder that he was still here, that he was still alive. As long as he could feel the pain, he knew he was alright. He knew that it was when the cold faded away, turned to paradoxical feelings of warmth and sleepiness, that a mountaineer was truly in trouble. As he navigated the harsh mountain landscape, Jack occasionally let his eyes drift off course, taking in the sights around him. He could see shocks of blue, green, and red, the distant bright colors of boots, jackets, and hats belonging to the fallen climbers that came before him. Those who collapsed from exhaustion, who gave in to altitude sickness or succumbed to the cold. Memento mori, he said.
What? Gave in to altitude sickness. Okay.
Softly to himself.
There we go.
These frozen bodies represented that ever-present reminder of mortality, of death lurking just out of sight. He would not come for him, though. Not today. Not on this journey. He wouldn't let it. The hours blurred together within the crunch of the ice beneath his boots, the dig of climbing hooks into the earth, the tug of his trusty ropes as he ascended ever higher. Jack came to a stop. There was no next step to take, nowhere higher that he could go. He had reached the summit. The white whale was captured, and Everest was his.
Success!
For the very first time, he was truly on top of the world. Now that he had made it to the highest point, there was the all-important task of climbing back down. At this altitude, he was still in the death zone, the place where human acclimatization was impossible. This was the tricky part, the point at which even the most experienced of climbers might get lost in the euphoria of the achievement and might let their attention slip. Any mistake during his descent, any misstep, could be the thing that cost him his life. There was no room for error and no time to waste. Just as Jack prepared to make his descent, he saw a figure pulling itself over the ridge. From a distance, it looked like a fellow climber. He noticed the curious lack of equipment and the way the person seemed to be making their way up the mountain with nothing but their hands. But perhaps they had lost their pack or left it behind for some reason. The figure was dressed in all white, from their hood to their boots, with a large pair of black mountain goggles covering what little of their face wasn't concealed by the hood. Uncertain if the figure was in need of assistance, and surprised to see another soul on the mountain with him, Jack waved at the figure. "Everything okay?" he called. There was no response, but the figure turned to look at him. At least, he thought it was looking at him. He couldn't see its eyes through the goggles, but he felt the distinct sensation of it locking its gaze with his just the same. As soon as the figure turned to look at him, Jack began to feel strange. The pain, the sharp sensation of the cold that he relied on to ground himself and remember he was really here, began to blur around the edges. The feeling softened, melting away along with the ache in his muscles, the bleariness in his eyes, the dry mouth that had nagged at him for hours. He felt unbalanced, unmoored, a ship with no anchor. He couldn't explain why.
Oh, come on! And we're back.
The sudden relief from the cold made his chest tighten with primal terror. He did not feel like one man encountering another on the mountain. He felt the way he had years ago, when he came face to face with a mountain lion, staring down a predator, and remembering all of a sudden that humans do not naturally sit at the top of the food chain. This figure, this thing, it was no man. It was no person. Jack prepared to continue his descent, to get away from the strange intruder as quickly as possible, but his feet would not obey him. His eyes could not break contact with the figure in white that was slowly beginning to advance toward him, one slow step at a time. It was in no hurry. It knew he was not going anywhere anytime soon. He trembled as the figure drew closer, its inscrutable face hidden beneath its hood and behind its goggles. He wished he could just see its face, but dreaded learning what secrets it was hiding. If only he could just unstick his feet from the earth, break free of this spell that had fallen over him, he could escape. But no matter how much his muscles strained, how he gritted his teeth with effort, he couldn't get away. As the entity came closer, the cold snapped back into his body, but something was different. It was heightened, like every icy breeze and freezing wind layered on top of itself, hardening his muscles to rock, crystallizing the very blood in his veins. He felt as if his fingers, if he tried to wriggle them, would snap off and fall to the ground. His eyes thrummed in their sockets, his lungs stretched to hold on to each breath as the cold constricted its fist around his chest. He opened his mouth to speak, but his voice died in his throat, coming out in a weak whisper of air. Now the thing was close enough to touch him, and whatever force had been holding him still and upright released him. It was as if he were a marionette suspended in the air, and the puppeteer released his strings at once. He crumpled to the snow-covered ground in a heap, his cheek pressed into the earth, his eyes trained helplessly on the still advancing figure. His lip formed the word, "Please," though he could not tell exactly what he was begging for. His life, his freedom, a painless death perhaps. He struggled to push himself to his feet, but all the strength had gone out of his limbs. He could barely lift his arm, let alone handle the weight of his whole body. The thing shaped like a man was right above him, glowering down through those opaque
Jack
goggles.
is definitely
He
dead.
still could not see its eyes, but somehow he could feel the way it was looking at him. Hatred was radiating off of it, disdain and pure, unadulterated malice. Then it tilted its head to the side thoughtfully, and Jack's mind was overwhelmed with images. He felt the phantom sensation of sunlight on his skin and springy green grass beneath his bare feet. He could see, clear as day in his mind's eye, a forest in the middle of summer. Dewdrops sparkling on the petals of wildflowers blowing in a gentle, sweet breeze. Then he felt sand between his toes, smelled the sea breeze, felt the comfort and contentment of a nap on the beach. It was not offering these things to him, but something like them, something like peace. It was offering him a gift, but he didn't want it. He couldn't take it. He was Jack Frost, damn it. He thrived in the cold, the hardship. He didn't want some warm, sleepy fade out of existence. If he went out, it would be on his terms, doing the thing he had dedicated his life to. If he were going to lose his life, he wouldn't roll over and just give it up. It would need to be pried from his frozen hands. With every last bit of strength, he twisted his head away from the entity's gaze, covering his
what is this? Whoa, back. That was like 5 seconds.
His hands. It grabbed at him, shaking his shoulders, trying to force him to uncover his face and meet its gaze once more. But he didn't budge. He wouldn't.
Godfrey,
He couldn't.
just like a bear.
Then he felt the energy shift as it realized he had refused the gift, that he would not welcome the paradoxical feelings of heat and security, and slip away as it was asking him to.
Okay,
but it was not
that is
a victory.
cool.
He swore he could hear a voice in his mind say, "Very well. You wish to be part of the mountain. I will make it so." The world went white as Jack's eyes rolled back in his head, his spine curving back until it snapped. His jaw cracked and distended, his arms and legs stretched out long and twisted, his body contorted at unnatural angles as the entity began to rearrange his very being. As the agony ripped through him, snapping his bones and tearing his muscles, Jack kept his face cradled in his hands. He remained in that position even as he cried, his voice hoarse, as the pure fear and pain overwhelmed his senses, until he forgot his own name, forgot he was ever a man at all. When Jack was no more, when something else sat there in his place, pale and shivering, body racked with sobs, the king of the mountain turned and left him there, alone with his misery. Still, he would not uncover his face. He would not let himself be vulnerable, and would not look up. Days later, a group of mountaineers reached the summit of Everest and
one moment, folks. I'll be right back. And we're back. Let's finish
spotted a hairless figure crouched in the snow, weeping softly. "Are you all right?" one of them asked. The figure lifted its head slowly and locked eyes with the strangers. Its eyes widened in horror. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide in a wordless scream of rage and hurt, and with nothing human left in its mind or heart, SCP-096 took its very first victim. Now go check out SCP-096 Shy Guy Escape, Incident 096-1-A.
Whoa, look, there he is, the Mountain King. Oh, no, that's interesting. Okay. Well, folks, that's going to be the end of today's episode. I want you all to remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more down in the description. Link to the original video, so support them, and I'll see all of you folks next time when we flick on. Peace out.